In this video, I'm going to outline some realistic standards that you yourself should be at, from noob to freak, so you can set some realistic goals and expectations for your own play in Overwatch. I'll also give some tips at each level so you can more easily reach the next one. I'll be using game sense, mechanics and positioning as my 3 criteria. Game sense refers to the general understanding of the game and why and when decisions are made. Mechanics refers to aim as well as maximizing your hero's movement options, and positioning refers to where you play and why. Let's get into it. Credit to Jeff Nippard for the video inspiration.
Today some feelings I leave and cut her but feeling mistreated. I sleep on my shit and then tell me to drop, I don't see the reason.
Starting off at the noob level, you'll probably have spent a week to a month playing the game with at most 25 hours of playtime. If you actually play ranked, you'll likely be somewhere around bronze to silver, and your mechanics are actually the aspect of your play to be the best out of the other 2 categories, as you're likely a casual player of FPS games, so you're somewhat used to general shooting mechanics. But your game sense and positioning are basically non-existent. As a complete noob to Overwatch, you probably don't know any of the basic terminology like frontline, backline, a choke, flank, off angle, let alone some of the more complex terminology mentioned in this video here. And if you do know those terms, you'll likely know them from other games you played prior to Overwatch. As a result, your game sense is mainly comprised of the knowledge you have of the handful of heroes you already play, let alone the entire roster of 35 heroes. Your positioning also has no thoughts. Your mental capacity is likely to be filled to the brim trying to get your head around the new maps, what your hero actually does, and trying to land some damage. This all means you just haven't got the mental space to account for where you position yourself, let alone actually timing your pressure with your team, which when you do it, is done completely accidentally. Because of how fast paced Overwatch is, even if you come from different FPS games like Valorant, you'll definitely feel the different level of mechanical adjustment that you'll need to make. No longer can you cope and hold an angle in Valorant with minimal mouse movements. To move on to the next level, it's just time. Literally just time spent playing the game. It's that simple. At the very beginning, you just need to be doing more reps of Overwatch, learning the heroes and maps, and just by virtue of playing the game over a longer span of time, your mechanics will get better too. If you're hard to stock bronze, however, even with 100 hours into Overwatch, that's where it becomes an issue. My advice here would be to solely focus on your mechanics. Having average mechanics, like a gold or platinum player, will just by virtue climb you out of bronze.
If we gotta gamble, I bet on myself, all that other shit dangerous.
Now onto the second level. At this point in your Overwatch journey, you've probably sunk in between 25 to 50 hours and are pushing into gold. You're still nowhere near the top end of the player base across all 3 categories, but you're making some progress, achieving very basic levels of game sense and positioning. Don't get me wrong, this doesn't mean that you start taking angles all of a sudden, but that you're just a little bit less prone to feeding. You're vaguely aware of when you're overextending, and you're vaguely aware of where the enemy team are. Still, not much thought goes into your cooldowns. If you're an Honor player, you toss away things like Sleep Dart or Nade without a care in the world about how to actually use the ability, and the same goes with any cooldown for any hero. Whether that be your shield on Reinhardt, Winston or Sigma, your blinks on Tracer, your heal resource on Moira, your speed amp on Lucio, your power slide on Sojourn, I could go on for days. To move on to the next level, my biggest piece of advice is to have thought or focus into some aspect of your play. No longer will it be good enough to just spend time playing the game mindlessly. Now is the time where having some dedicated thought into how you use your cooldowns, where you place your crosshairs, and even where you position yourself will have the greatest ROI or return on investment. In other words, focusing on some areas of your play will give you the biggest bang for your buck.
So I think you whole niggas should bow in the presence of greatness, let's go.
Moving on to the third level, intermediates. Now this is when casual players start thinking about competitive play to a decent degree. Now you've probably sunk anywhere under 100 hours into the game and are somewhat average in the player base, being either platinum or gold. This is the point where I'd say, especially for platinum players, your mechanics start becoming disproportionately better than your game sense and positioning. Now of course, this doesn't apply for everyone, and I should know this myself since I don't play mechanically intensive heroes, and in fact, my hero pool is mainly Reinhardt, Brigitte and Moira. At this point, your positioning and game sense haven't really changed from the last level. Maybe every once in a blue moon, you'll actually take an angle or be in the right position at the right time. You might even start putting some more thought into your cooldowns. But I'd say that the biggest piece to the puzzle of ranking up to the next level is understanding your hero's purpose. In other words, understanding why you play the heroes you play, what they can do that other heroes don't, and how you win games with the heroes that you play. This is essentially building the game sense foundation for the following levels, because having a general rule of thumb that you're trying to stick to and knowing why you're sticking to it can be very useful later on. For example, with Tracer, you play her for map control. You're one of the best duelists in the game, so if there's a DPS flanking, you can mark that DPS, and even if you don't kill them, you'll force them back main, lowering the value that they get. Luckily for all you DPS players, I cover each fundamental in my 90,000 word hero guide, which I'll link down below. Or in Zenyatta, knowing that you're played for your Discord orbs, or in Roadhog, knowing that you're played for your hook ability and getting picks can drastically help your understanding of how to actually play your hero from a broader macro perspective.
Stop that. Stop it, please. Stop that. Stop it, please.
Jumping onto the 4th level, Advanced. At this point, you've probably sunk in anywhere from 50 to 250 hours and are certainly above average among the player base, being somewhere in diamonds. For most players, your mechanical skill starts leapfrogging above your other stats, with your positioning not lagging too far behind, with game sense being the main area to focus on. As British Overwatch YouTuber SVB denoted in an older video of his, Diamond is the rank where, for most players at least, the gap between your mechanical skill and your game sense starts to become most apparent. In other words, you're disproportionately better at mechanics than game sense. For DPS players in particular, different types of aiming like flicking, tracking or leading shots start to get quite a bit better, and you're really not mechanically far off from your contemporaries in Master or GM. However, your game sense just isn't up to par. A tendency a lot of Diamond players, DPS 1s in particular do, is force fights or force duels that simply aren't in their favour. You could be dueling a Widowmaker from 50 meters away as Soldier or Sojourn and still ego peek for no reason instead of taking an alternative angle, or in Tank, you panic grab on Zarya or go in too deep with your bubbles. On support, you overextend on Brigitte, thinking you're built like your godfather, you toss away your sleep darts on Ana, or do questionable reses on Mercy, or are still too lazy with your damage boost. So the main piece of advice to get to the next level is to not only think about maximizing the advantages your hero has, but to also minimize the disadvantages that you find yourself in. Please, don't ego peek a Sojourn with full charge, take a different angle instead.
When you hit the mattress, imagine a mansion. I feel like a madman, a master in a vein living.
Now entering the penultimate level, Elites. You very likely have 3-digit hours into the game, anywhere from 100 to 500, lying in the top 10 to 5% of the player base in Master. Your game sense starts to catch up, alongside your other stats improving in a linear fashion. I'm just going to get straight to it and say that the biggest thing for you to improve on here is your mid-fight rotations. In other words, it's your ability to flank and take angles in the mid-fight when there's a ton of chaos going around. Normally it's quite easy to just sit from an angle at the beginning of a fight, and if you get forced out, well, you get forced out. You don't look to take another angle. I think a great example of this is on Junkertown first point defense, where the cart is about to be capped, and where your entire team are just struggling for a recontest. Very few players will actually take the time to take a high risk, high reward rotation by the buildings in the attacker's spawn, which could be fight winning. Dorado first point defense can also be another good example, where you have a great flank through the shop window, and here's yet another example I give on Blizzard World. Imagine if you were here. Look at the nade you could get on backline here. By the way, you had plenty of time to rotate to high ground. You had plenty of time. You could have been walking forward, healing your monkey, healing your monkey, healing your monkey, healing your monkey, rotate up high grounds, nano your Farah, nade backline, win the fight. Easy clap, clean, right? These sort of opportunities that arise when either team is fighting is what makes or breaks your wins and losses, so my practical advice here is that whilst none of you watching will do this, actually look through one of your recent games and see what positions you could have taken as the fight goes on instead of sitting main.
Stop that. Stop it, please. Stop that. Stop it, please.
Now onto the final level of the video, Freak. If you're at the stage, you undoubtedly have a few hundred hours into the game, and I certainly wouldn't be surprised if it starts breaking into 4-digit territory. You lie in the top 1% of the player base, being Grandmaster, or even going as far as top 500 in High Grandmaster. You're pretty stacked out on every level, but there's still some improvements to be made on all fronts. At this level, your game sense is often expressed through your ability to predict what's going to happen. I'm sure you've seen some clip of some top level streamer predicting exactly how a fight is going to go, or top level Reinhardt predicting when and how the enemy Reinhardt is going to shatter, or a Roadhog player predicting a hook around a corner or onto a Tracer after she's used recall. Really, it's the innate freakish ability to predict how events are going to play out in a split second that mark that Grandmaster level game sense. With positioning, not only is taking angles to bog standards, but longer, riskier and fight-winning flanks start to take place, especially in mid to high GM. With mechanics, of course they're going to be pinpoint most of the time, but the key thing is actually consistency with aim. GM players are consistently good and reliable. It's not like one game they're playing Sojourn, getting one-shots every time they charge their railgun, and in the other game they can't hit the blind side of a barn. Consistent players hit shots they should, they punish mispositioning well, and occasionally they'll express some flair in their own gameplay. So what's missing? Well, from what I've seen, is this notion of experimentation. I mentioned prior how higher level GM players tend to take riskier and longer flanks, and that's because the reward is generally higher. Even in the tank category, look at players like LH Cloudy, who will literally pin straight into the enemy backline to trade out. And experimentation doesn't just mean with one's own gameplay, but it can also mean counterpicking and having the courage to try something different in a certain situation. A great example of this is with the team I coach, Warwick Angels, and for reference, this team is mid to high GM, and this game that I'm about to go through are two of the best collegiate teams in the UK going head to head. Essentially, we play a very weird composition around what our players look strong at, hence why we play Sim Hog, and you actually might have seen some of Meta's videos. Anyways, our comp kinda got rolled on the first map, and my explanation for this was the lack of Brigitte. What was actually happening was the enemy Orisa Reaper was steamrolling our front line of Hog Symmetra, and we didn't have teleport to escape since Meta used it to get to points. So in order to fix this, in the next map, I advised running Brig over Ana to deter the Reaper from pushing in, thanks to Brig's brawly capabilities. And for the most part, it worked. Their Reaper got such little value, he actually ended up swapping to Mei instead. If we had stuck playing Kiriko Ana, I'm certain that we would have lost this crucial series for our team. So the lesson here is, whether you're playing on a team or are grinding ranked, being meta slaves or sticking to whatever you're comfortable with 24/7 will only get you so far. If you do counterpick, have reasons for doing so. Well, that's the video. I hope you enjoyed, and if you did, be sure to like, comment and subscribe. Until next time.